Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Alex Parkinson. I'm a senior researcher with the Conference Board, and we are here today to talk about standardized social outcomes for companies. We have a great agenda for you today, and I'm joined by a couple of fantastic speakers who I will introduce in just a second. But first, I just want to go over a couple of things with you and welcome you to the program today. We have a new report coming out from the Conference Board and the Impact Genome project, which is actually out tomorrow, with a generous grant of support from Moody's as well. So please keep an eye out for that when it's released tomorrow. The report itself is called Towards Standardized Social Outcomes for Companies. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Surprise, surprise. So some of the things that we're going to be answering today are how can we respond more effectively to ongoing challenges with social impact measurement? What can standardized social outcomes tell us about social impact measurement? Does a data-driven approach to social impact measurement and reporting match your company's approach to data? And what are the lessons learned from a company at the forefront of working with the Impact Genome project? So a few great questions that we'll be answering today. But before we get there, just a couple of housekeeping items for you. We will open the lines to a Q&A section at the latter half of today's program. So please feel free to ask questions as they occur to you. You'll see in the bottom left corner of the screen a chat pod, and you can pose your questions there. No need to wait for us to queue you as well. If you put them throughout the program as they occur to you, we'll try to weave them in. You can download the presentation directly from your screen here via the file download pod in the bottom center of your screen. You can also make the screen full screen for video or PowerPoint at any time by clicking the 4 arrows at the top right of your screen. I recommend not making it full screen video when it is just me on there. You can complete the brief evaluation at the end. Well, actually, this is a request. Can you please complete the brief evaluation at the end so we can incorporate your feedback into future programs? We'd appreciate that. And then share this program with your colleagues as well. We do record these and they're made available on demand for Conference Board members. So once that's available, please feel free to share that around to those who might be interested. Stay tuned at the end. We have a discount code as well for a Conference Board conference at the end of this program. And then finally, you can earn CPE credits by attending this program today. So you've made the first step by being here. The other one is to follow the instructions as they occur throughout the program and stay on to the end. So, with all that out of the way, I would like to introduce my esteemed guests today. First of all, we have Arlene Isaac-Slowe from Moody's, the Global Head of CSR at Moody's Corporation and the President of Moody's Foundation. Arlene, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to have partnered with Mission Measurement on this project.
Thanks, Arlene. And you know what? We're going to hear from Marcy in a second about where she's actually hiding out today. But it's inspired me to ask you, Arlene, where would you be vacationing if you were vacationing now?
Well, in all honesty, I just got back from Destin, Florida on Sunday. So it hasn't been too far that I've been away on vacation. But I travel the world in my role, and I thoroughly enjoy it.
Pleased to hear it. Pleased to hear it. So thanks for joining us, Arlene. And Marcy, I gave a little bit away there, but we're joined today by Marcy Tweet, who is the Managing Director of Mission Measurement. Why don't you share with everyone where you are and say hello?
I am in sunny Fort Myers, Florida, and on vacation, but happy to join you and share in this awesome moment with publishing this report this week, and wouldn't have missed it. So glad to be here from Florida.
Thank you very much, Marcy. Okay, now to kick us off today, I just want to tell you a little bit more about the report and discuss with Marcy and Arlene the Impact Genome project, where it sits in the world of social impact measurement and the importance of it. First of all, a little bit of history as to how we came to be studying this area and researching this area at the Conference Board specifically. We've been looking at it really closely since about 2013, when we did a couple of reports laying the foundation a little bit, understanding social impact measurement a little bit more. During that process of researching, we came across a series of challenges that companies were facing in terms of social impact measurement. There were things like a lack of resources among nonprofits to measure impact, a lack of robust, trustworthy data in the impact field, a lack of standardized definitions for impact, also of methodologies and metrics and practices for measuring social impact. In a world that is really full of complex challenges and often unrelated issues. There are also high costs of measuring impact, which goes along with the lack of resources and the difficulty nonprofits face. Most reporting of social impact really focused on total contributions or costs and outputs, and not really outcomes and impacts, which is where the field is really heading and what we're trying to get a hold of a little bit more. And then nonprofits were also receiving multiple different requests for unique impact metrics, and that goes to the point about standardization. So it really became clear to us that the impact measurement field would benefit from a standardized, common reporting framework for impact measurement that helps nonprofits meet the needs of multiple stakeholders efficiently and cost effectively. Such a process would also encourage benchmarking and comparability of impact metrics and allow organizations to identify successes, challenges, opportunities, and make more informed decisions about where to direct resources and corporate contributions to meet their goals. So that led us to our partnership with Mission Measurement and the Impact Genome Project, and we're delighted to have been working with them for about the past year on starting to collect data from companies specifically. We're now just about, as I've mentioned previously, about to release our first report out of this pilot program, essentially, from data collected last year from 16 companies. We cover nearly 650 nonprofit programs and more than $2 billion in community funding. And the data has allowed us to highlight 14 of the what we call spotlight social outcomes that the impact of the Impact Genome Project's nearly 150. They gave us enough data to draw some benchmarks, such as efficacy rates and cost per outcomes of those social outcomes. So I want to just start with Marcy and have a little chat here about the Impact Genome Project a little further. Can you tell us how you have seen social impact measurement evolve in the past decade or so that has brought us to where we are today with this project?
Thanks, Alex. You did a great job outlining some of the real issues that we've seen, and I know the conference board has seen, in the world of nonprofit and corporate funding, and the cry for impact measurement that we've seen over the last few years and even the last decade. Mission measurement has been deeply ingrained in the area of social impact measurement for more than 15 years. Our CEO, Jason Saul, is one of the premier leaders in the world on this topic. But rewind a few years back, and what Jason and his team would tell you is they were becoming frustrated with the state of impact measurement. Forward-thinking corporations and foundations and sophisticated nonprofits have long wondered and worked on the issue of measuring impact, but the truth is they were often doing that in a vacuum. One corporation, one foundation, measuring and evaluating the strength of one set of partners at any one given time. So Jason and our team at Mission Measurement wanted to break that cycle. That's what we've done with the Impact Genome, to create a standard for social measurement that takes this work out of a vacuum and creates a universal data-driven standard for social impact measurement. So where we are today is quite clear. Funders want a standard for which they can measure, benchmark, even predict and design the efficacy of their programs. And nonprofits want one standard as well. Every day, nonprofits are reporting on 100 different standards to 100 different funders. And only when we really achieve that standard will we be able to start to measure long-term impact from both sides of that marketplace, funder and nonprofit. It's an exciting time to be in this space, and I think the conference board report that's coming out tomorrow really hits the nail on the head on the beginning of this movement towards outcomes measurement.
Great, thank you very much, Marcy. Arlene, we're very lucky to have you here, and there's no one better, I don't think, to give us a sort of understanding of where impact measurement generally, but specifically the Impact Genome Project, sort of sits in the world of CSR and how it's changing for companies and corporate leaders, why it's so important for these companies to take a leading position on CSR and social issues and take greater responsibility here. Could you tell us reflect on that for us a little bit and give us your experience at Moody's?
Certainly, Alex. Before I assumed responsibility for this role as Global Head of Corporate Social Responsibility for Moody's, I ran the commercial operations for EMEA for the rating agency. And my observation several years ago was increasingly we were beginning to more frequently be asked about aspects around our ESG profile as it related to our engagement with our customer base. Certainly, it was a trend that we were observing more deliberately in Europe, but what we thought was there seemed to be a greater desire for our stakeholders to align with companies that had the same sorts of values, irrespective of the types of services or products that you offered. And so fast forward to today, what we've also seen is that there has been greater investor demand around transparency on ESG characteristics of the companies that they're invested in. So much so that Moody's actually has launched a significant effort in the assessment of ESG characteristics as it relates to how it influences our views of credit profiles. And that being said, we've also seen greater call to action from some of the largest asset managers who have sizable investments in multinational companies around sort of how do they view their long-term value and their contributions to society in an effort to really ensure that a company continues to create value in a responsible and meaningful way. Certainly, we've also seen that political winds have shifted, not just in the United States, but globally. And so there's a greater call to action for corporations to be more deliberate about their societal engagement. And with that, we're also seeing that there's an expectation around greater transparency and the evaluation of the impact that corporations are making as they think about their philanthropic endeavors and other societal engagements. And so I think that is a significant change to what we've seen perhaps a decade ago. And it really speaks to the need for the ability to be able to articulate the impact that a company is having from its engagement with nonprofit partners, and to be able to do that in comparison with their peer groups. And so from our perspective, this is a great initiative to move that trend forward in a deliberate and responsible way.
Your experience a little bit more, of course we will later in the webcast. Before leaving you on this point at the moment, though, I just wanted to discuss something else, and something particularly that came out of a conversation that we hosted with Jennifer Cohan from Edelman last week, actually, about the latest Edelman Trust Barometer. And one of the things that the Trust Barometer has found this year, in fact over the past couple of years, but I think it really stands out this year, is that the non-profit sector, trust in the non-profit sector, is surprisingly low. And Jennifer posits that a lot of that is to do with the demands that are placed on them and the high expectations and the difficulty they have non-profits have responding to that. Arlene, how do you see the Impact Genome Project as a way to help regain trust in the non-profit sector?
Well, Alex, and actually I listened to that webcast, and I thought it was fascinating because it also indicated that the greatest amount of trust is with employers and employees and the companies they're employed by. And so there's a shift in terms of the trust relegated to a corporation versus nonprofits for all the reasons that you've indicated, because of sort of a lack of capacity to really drive their missions going forward. The way that we see the Impact Genome Project impacting that ability for nonprofits is that it will provide them an ability to really tell their story and to also evaluate where there may be opportunities for them to be more effective and efficient at driving more impact for the beneficiaries they serve. And so with that and an ability to articulate their outcomes, we believe that it will certainly reinstitute a level of trust in nonprofits and the work that they do.
Great, thanks. Marcy, anything you wanted to add to that about your work with some of the nonprofits who are reporting through the Impact Genome Project about helping to rebuild trust in the sector?
Absolutely. I think a huge issue related to trust in the sector is really about the power differential between nonprofits and corporations, or even nonprofits and individual donors and foundations. There's still this idea. One of my favorite books is Jim Collins' Good to Great. And if you've read Jim Collins' book, also read, he wrote a small addition to that book for the social sector. And he talks about corporations and foundations getting away from what he calls time telling and letting nonprofits build the clock. And I think that's been one of the things that has lacked trust in nonprofits over time, as corporate, foundation, and individual funders are asking nonprofits to do more time telling and not enough building the clock. That trust continues to erode and the power differential continues to grow. So I think as we see nonprofits becoming more data driven, more evidence based, with corporate funders and foundation funders and individual funders giving more trust and allowing that trust to be based on evidence and data, we will see that trust in the nonprofit sector grow back, I hope.
Great. Okay, I will now move on to some of the insights from the report specifically and just talk with you both a little bit about these. So we have 5 points here that have emerged from both the data that we collected through the Impact Genome Project, the case studies that we featured as well. Of course, one of those is Moody's, the other one is the Allstate Foundation and the Albertsons Companies Foundation as well. So the first point here is that according to the efficacy rates that we found from this benchmark, most nonprofit programs that are supported by companies are affected. Are effective, not affected. They are affected too. So we define the efficacy rates as the percentage of beneficiaries served by the program who achieve the outcome. And what we saw is that across all 14 of those spotlight outcomes, they delivered efficacy rates of above 60%. So at least a majority of participants achieving the social outcome. But not only that, and I think more pertinently, the vast majority were above 80%. So we're really seeing high levels of efficacy among those nonprofit programs that are participating in the Impact Genome Project so far. Marcy, I want to go back to you. Can you explain a little bit more about what these efficacy rates mean and how they're calculated at the Impact Genome Project?
The important distinction in recognizing the importance of efficacy rate is to understand the real difference between an output and an outcome. I tend to use STEM education as an example because I was fortunate to lead a CSR department who's focused on STEM. And I think a lot of our listeners won't be surprised to see that education is one of the most widely funded areas of social impact for corporations. So every year, a STEM education funder asks the same questions of nonprofits. How many kids did you serve? That's an output. And getting to outcomes might seem difficult in this area, but in truth, what the Impact Genome has found is that for STEM education, for example, there's really only 3 ultimate goals funders might have at a really macro level for STEM. 1, you want to get kids more interested in STEM. 2, you want to increase their proficiency in STEM, getting them better at the concepts. And 3, you want them to have STEM persistence. Are they continuing to choose STEM courses, college majors, and eventually careers? The Impact Genome asks nonprofit organizations to report on outcomes. So in addition to how many kids in your program, how many of them met that threshold for being more interested, more proficient, or more persistent in STEM? Efficacy rate then is a really simple calculation. If there are 1,000 kids in your STEM program and 950 of them met that threshold for one of those key outcomes that they've chosen, then your efficacy rate is 95%. So for funders, what this means is for the first time being able to measure the impact of your dollars on outcomes and efficiency, not just on the number of beneficiaries served. Because ultimately, I hope we can all agree that we don't want nonprofits to measure success on how many people come through their door. We want them to measure success on the outcomes their programs produce.
Arlene, do you agree with that? And I know Moody's is particularly focused on STEM. Can you reflect on your experience a little bit with the Impact Genome project in the STEM area and some of the outcomes that you're seeking to achieve?
Absolutely. So we are in total agreement with that. What we have experienced is, as a matter of applying the Impact Genome to our portfolio of nonprofit funding, we have been able to have some significant strategic conversations with some of our nonprofit partners. So driving back to when we sort of reinvented our CSR strategy as a function of really thinking about how we wanted to articulate our value to the society that we're operating in. One of the things that we did was to be very deliberate and intentional about our focus areas. And so as a result of getting some input and feedback from our stakeholders, we focused on 3 specific focus areas. And of those, one of them was education. Now, we've always had a strong education focus in our philanthropic giving and our employee engagement, but what we wanted to do was to be more intentional and align with the values, experiences, and expertise and the passion of our employees. And so in looking at that, and really what we were trying to achieve was to expand the potential pipeline of women and diverse candidates who may explore careers not just in STEM broadly, but specifically in finance, economics, and technology. We also wanted to be more deliberate about the age group that we were reaching. And so we focused not necessarily on all primary school and education, but really wanted to hone in on ages 15 to 24. And so one of the things that we looked at as the outcome of the Impact Genome project was the comparisons of focus areas and the primary outcomes that were being measured. And while we had assumed that, given that we had culled the portfolio to try to be more deliberate about our focus areas, we were still experiencing some relationships where they weren't necessarily aligned with what we were trying to achieve. And so it certainly provided us an opportunity to have a deeper conversation with those nonprofit partners and to explore areas of alignment. And I would say that those conversations have gone extremely well, either in the context of being able to shift our support to programming that's aligned with our strategy, or in some cases been able to sort of think about how to responsibly transition nonprofits out of the portfolio and then increase our exposure to those nonprofits that are better aligned.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Arlene. Okay, so I mentioned earlier there were 2 benchmark metrics that really came to the fore from this project. One of them was the efficacy rate that we've just discussed. The other is the cost per outcome, really looking at the cost for the program to enable one beneficiary to achieve the outcome. So essentially asking how much can you as a fund, how many outcomes can you as a funder buy, for your grant. Knowing this really helps the companies and funders understand total cost of ownership of achieving social impact. It can help then manage expectations of both nonprofits in terms of funding patterns and priorities of the company, but as well of company leaders to help them understand and manage their expectations in terms of what can be achieved with the funding as well. Nonetheless, if you are given two cost per outcomes and one costs $7,500 for you to achieve one outcome and the other costs about $250 to achieve that outcome, there might be some negative connotations with that. And I want to address that with you, Marcy, because that shouldn't be the case. So can you just tell us what a high cost per outcome actually means for a nonprofit program, and should it be penalized? What do you do with that information?
Well, it definitely shouldn't be penalized. High cost per outcome, or cost per outcome in general, is an indicator. It's not a black and white issue. So take, for example, two organizations working on arts education. One might be a large museum or cultural institution in New York City that's bringing thousands of kids through its door every year. Another might be a small, high-touch program run out of Cincinnati that touches 100 kids per year but does a deep dive into social emotional learning skills and long-term interest in arts-related careers. The cost per outcome for program A would be very different, much lower than in program B, but our inclusion of these statistics is not to say program B is better because it has a higher efficacy rate, or program A is better because it has a lower cost per outcome. Our intent is to give funders an opportunity to compare and contrast these programs, but not necessarily to rate them against one another. All of my team members and colleagues at Mission Measurement, and anyone who's worked with me, can tell you that one of my pet peeves in nonprofit and corporate funding is the word giving. Because there's been this traditional sense that we give to charities, but I think what cost per outcome does is frame things in an investment way, and frame it in a way that funders can look at a portfolio of philanthropy. So in a balanced portfolio, a funder will have small, high-touch programs that might have incredibly high efficacy rates, but might also have a low cost per or a high cost per outcome. They'll also have large-scale programs that might reach thousands of beneficiaries whose cost per outcome might be very low. It's all about seeing your portfolio holistically, asking critical questions of the nonprofits in your program, and determining how that fits with your strategy and with theirs. Moody's has been through exactly this conversation, so I know Arlene will have great things to say as well.
Yeah, and indeed, I was about to ask Arlene to reflect on that as well. So please tell us what your experience has been with that metric and some of the conversations and feedback that you've heard from your nonprofit partners.
We absolutely agree with the points that Marcy has made, that it is not about comparing the cost per outcome from one program to another, but really having the information to be able to assess what you're trying to accomplish. So if you think about, for instance, education, we may have one organization that has a cost per outcome of $7,500, as was indicated. And then there may be another organization in the education portfolio that may have a cost of outcome of $1,000 per outcome. And so there's a difference in terms of what both those organizations are trying to accomplish. In one case, they may be casting a really wide net to get high school students, for instance, to be incentivized or encouraged to explore careers in STEM broadly. And in another case, it may be evaluating the success of a college program in really placing those students into careers of STEM. And so in one instance, it's sort of, you think of it as an early investment, and so the cost per outcome is lower. And in the other instance, it is a more direct investment into the expansion of the pipeline, and you would expect that that cost would be greater. So what the information does, though, is it does make funders think about what they're funding, what their expectations are, and in some cases there are opportunities to help the nonprofit organization improve its efficiency and the number of beneficiaries that it ultimately is reaching.
Okay, we might come back to an example of that later, Arlene, but thanks for sharing your experience there. Okay, I just want to remind everyone as well that you feel free to ask questions and post comments in the chat pod below if there's something that's piqued your interest here and you want to hear more about. Otherwise, I will continue on to the next insight that we've drawn from this, and this is perhaps an unsurprising one, but we found that education is the social impact area in which companies pursued the broadest array of social outcomes. And that's unsurprising because we know from other benchmarks that that education is the most funded area by corporate philanthropy as well. And Marcy, I'm being very conscious here not to use the word giving. And if I slip up, then you'll wrap me over the remote the remote connection. Okay, so I just want to go over some of the education outcomes that the Impact Genome Project uses. They are academic performance, college persistence and completion, career access and readiness, high school completion, college access and readiness, and STEM interest. Marcy, first of all, did I capture them all there? Am I missing any?
No, I think you definitely hit all of those, and it's, again, not surprising that we've seen those as the most invested. I think education tends to come to the forefront for corporate funders.
Yeah. Now, I want to understand just a little bit of the process of working with the Impact Genome Project here and what it actually means for you to go into a company and help them start to understand the outcomes that they're achieving. Could we use education as an example here and just walk us through the practice of what happens and how you land on the outcomes that the program is actually achieving?
Sure. So the Impact Genome is built on academic research, a lot of metadata, nonprofit data and evaluations, and built with the help of numerous advisory groups, advisory councils who are experts in the field of education, who are deep dive experts in things like high school completion, social emotional learning, STEM, academic performance. And the genome is consistently curated and updated based on what we learn in the process of adding more programs to the genome. One of the analogies we like to use about the Impact Genome is a 23andMe or an Ancestry DNA test. It's a little crude to say, but the truth about 23andMe and Ancestry DNA is that the more people who spit in the cup and give their DNA to those systems, the better those systems are. So for us, the same applies. The more data that comes into our system from corporations, from nonprofits, from academic research, the more we can curate and update the genome as time goes on. So we're listening all the time to the way corporate funders are funding. We're listening to the kinds of things that nonprofits are doing to curate and cultivate each of those outcomes in all of those major areas.
Okay, I'm going to go straight on to the next insight here and then come back to you, Arlene, because the other insight that we discovered is that by using standardized social outcomes to understand social impact, companies might learn that they're not funding the right types of outcomes. You touched on this a little bit before, Arlene. I just wanted to again get your experience of working with the Impact Genome Project and understanding and finding out exactly what outcomes you were achieving or not achieving that you thought you were achieving in that process.
Certainly. So, and I think it's outlined in the case study that's included in the report. But in one instance, we've had a long-standing relationship with an organization that we deeply believe in their mission and what they've been able to accomplish, and that's the Heydrich Martin Institute. But what we discovered as a result of the Impact Genome Project is that they were not really aligned specifically with a STEM outcome, or even more specifically with the areas that we were focused in on. However, that outcome allowed us the opportunity to have a conversation with them to think about how we could best transform the program that we were supporting in a way that would more fit in alignment with our portfolio. And so as a result of that, we were able to collaborate with HMI, Hetrick Martin Institute, to create what is now called the Queer Coders Program. And so as opposed to sort of being able to advocate and provide support for LGBTA youth more generally, we were able to sort of focus the organization on not just providing immediate needs for these young people, but also directing them in a possible career path. And so as a result of that, they have been able to not only increase their relationship with Moody's to include mentorship and perhaps some internships in the future, but will be able to tell a different story to perhaps a wider diversity of potential funders as it relates to really pipeline and workforce development for an underserved community. So we were really thrilled about the outcome of that, even though initially it seemed that a long-standing nonprofit partner did not align directly with what our focus area was.
And I must say I wouldn't have expected that to be the story that came out of that. But I was really intrigued to hear that when we were doing the case study. So thank you for sharing that experience with us, Arlene. Okay, the final insight, which is more of a big picture insight, I think, but was really interesting to hear a lot more of as well. And it's not just Moody's. It's I think all of the companies that we featured, including Allstate Foundation again and the Albertsons Companies Foundation, is that companies seek a data-driven social impact measurement approach or tools. And really, the reason for that is to match their company's approach to data as well. And so, I mean, Allstate and Moody's both operate in the financials sector. The Albertsons Companies is a grocery retailer, so it's a very different sector, but still a very data-driven approach to business, and also to now to social impact measurement as well. Arlene, I want to explore just a little bit about your experience getting senior leaders to buy in on the project, and the importance of the data to your business at Moody's, and as a result to your approach to social impact measurement. Could you reflect on that for us?
Alex. So I talked about sort of the reinvention of our CSR strategy. And prior to this role, the role that I had sort of on the business side. And so when I assumed responsibility for our CSR strategy and really thinking about how to be more intentional about aligning that with the values, expertise, and the business that we're in, we started asking the question around well, how are we evaluating the portfolio? What are the KPIs? And given sort of that we're a data-driven company and the core of what we do is to provide research and tools to participants of the capital markets, we certainly wanted to apply that approach here to even our philanthropic portfolio and to all of our CSR activities. And so it really was not that much of a need to sell the senior leadership team on this. When we talked about Impact Genome and the ability to look at standardized and systematic measurements of outcomes for the performance of our nonprofit partners, they were immediately all in. They also were clear that as we do when we think about our analysis, that numbers and data is not the ultimate outcome, but it sets a baseline for you to compare and contrast and evaluate activities going forward. And so what we've decided to do was to use 2018 outcomes as our baseline, and then we will be establishing KPIs for our philanthropic portfolio and ultimately for other aspects of our CSR activities. So it is very well aligned with the direction that Moody's is heading in terms of being able to articulate in a very intentional way the role that we're playing in our corporate social responsibility activities.
Fascinating, and we're really looking forward to follow the story as well, Arlene, as you continue to work with the project and understand what the data and metrics are telling you. So that'll be great. Marcy, there are plenty of other companies that you're working with. Is it a similar response that you're getting from them about the data-driven approach to impact measurement?
It most definitely is. I talk to sometimes 30, 40 corporations a week, and in this world of CSR and ESG expectations, Arlene hit on it a couple of times in this webcast. Investors are asking more questions of corporations than ever before. We're almost drowning in the corporate world of data and standards with GRI and SASB, Dow Jones, Sustainalytics, and the list goes on. And the conversation I have every week with corporations is that they want their nonprofit partners to approach their work with the same rigor that is expected of corporations and of CSR departments. And it's not to say that a lot of nonprofits aren't doing that, but there hasn't been a clear-cut, standardized way for nonprofits to report on that work and that data-driven, evidence-based rigor that corporate funders are looking for. Ultimately, corporate funders really believe in the nonprofit sector's ability to drive social change, but like investors in the corporations, they want to see transparent, data-driven ways to protect those investments and to predict the outcome and the impact of them over time.
Great. Okay, so thank you both for sharing the insights with me and talking them through a little bit more. We now are on the official Q&A portion of the webcast. Just 2 minutes ahead of schedule. I got my little times here, and we're doing, behind schedule, and we're doing just fine, so well done. A reminder to everyone, feel free to pose your questions now. Arlene and Marcy and I will be happy to answer them, but I'm going to get the ball rolling. Arlene, first of all, so we've heard a lot about the requests of non-profits to participate in this. We noted that previously they had to respond to a number of different requests for reporting from different funders, and now they're sort of being asked to do a new thing as well. How have your nonprofit partners responded to this new request? Share some of the experiences with us.
I'd be happy to. So what I actually anticipated was that there would be some level of resistance by our nonprofit partners because, as you've indicated, they get multiple funding informational requests from their funders. And so this is one of the areas where they spend a fair amount of time because of their different requests. It tends to be inefficient and onerous, as opposed to them really focusing on trying to have more impact for the beneficiaries that they serve. So this idea of yet another measurement system, I thought, would have been met with a bit of resistance. What I was pleasantly surprised to find is that in describing Impact Genome and sort of the opportunity there for it to be wider spread and be able to provide information on a systematic and standardized way that they could then share with all of their funders, and that there was an effort in increasing the number of corporate funders who were participating in this project. They became more excited about understanding the project and participating in anticipation that ultimately it would result in more efficiency on their reporting. the other aspect of it, this is a function of sort of the passion that nonprofits tend to have, is they believe that with these standardized outcomes, they would be able to articulate a more definitive message to other corporate funders and ultimately hope for more diversity in their funding sources. So I was surprised and pleased on the response.
That's great. That's great. Now, I want to be careful not to be, too positive and affirming with this webcast. I want to share some of any challenges or negative feedback that you had as well, and just sort of talk that through and deal with it. If you didn't receive any, that's even better. But would you be willing to share any challenges that you heard from nonprofits, or was it all positive? And if it was,
well,
that's great.
Nothing is ever all. And I'll let Marcy weigh in here because I think the benefit of having mission measurement behind this was that when there were questions about the outcomes, either primary or secondary outcomes, and sort of how the project sort of considered these, mission measurement was a resource for the nonprofit to better learn about how to access and report in the system. So what was great for us is we were able to talk sort of at a high level of the benefits of the project and the issues in regards to reporting. Mission measurement was able to provide the nonprofit support. Now with the outcomes, because we've had long-standing relationships, and that is sort of what our really strategic direction is, that while we don't provide multi-year grants in many cases, our expectation is that we would have long-term relationships with our nonprofit partners. And so I think because of that landscape that has been established and the level of trust, I think they understood that irrespective of the outcomes and how that compared to the portfolio as a whole, they were convinced and that we would be having a more intentional and proactive conversation as opposed to making decisions to eliminate funding based on the outcome of the project.
Okay, so it sounds like good relationships and communications between the two parties is really key, and sharing the positive benefits that could occur. Marcy, just let's stick with this nonprofit participation for just a second, because I want to hear from you about some of your experiences and information with the crossover that nonprofits are seeing. So I know as more companies sign on to participate in the Impact Genome project, and that's fantastic. We want to continue to see both our members and all companies participating in this. What are you finding in terms of the number of nonprofits that you're having to reach out to, or that funders are having to reach out to? I mean, are they finding that some of them have already completed and participated in the project?
Yeah, absolutely. As we build this project, we're finding that more and more nonprofits are familiar with what we're doing, especially when we gain a lot of traction in, for instance, a specific market. So in the city of Chicago, where mission measurement is based, we often hear from nonprofit funders or nonprofit organizations that they've been asked to fill out the genome for one program from one funder and for a different program from a different funder. And the exciting moments in that are when nonprofits come to us and say, we want to fill out the genome for all our programs because we want to see not just for our after school program or not just for our camps, but for every program that we run, how we look as far as a scorecard goes within the Impact Genome. Those are exciting moments for us. I think the other exciting moments for nonprofits are are walking them through those hard processes. And as Arlene said, some of these moments are scary, right? Because a nonprofit who's used to reporting 1,000 kids went through my program might be a little nervous to tell a corporate funder that 900 of those kids met their outcome. And perhaps what the nonprofit feels is, oh, what happened with those 100 kids who didn't meet the outcome? But it opens up those trusting conversations between funder and nonprofit again. So it's been really exciting to see nonprofits get excited about this, to see their data in a different way. And ultimately, it's a capacity building tool for them. It gives them an easy, quick tool to fill out on program measurement. And it also gives them a way to promote their program to other funders and to say, here's the kind of data and the kind of evidence-driven organization we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic. I'm conscious of the clock here, and I think we're going to run out of time quicker than we anticipate. So I want to start to sort of wrap it up with some of the final questions and comments to make, and I'll remind everyone if they have any questions, please pose them now, because that last 10 minutes will tick away nice and quick. Let's look to the future, both Marcy and Arlene. Marcy, I'll start with you as a representative of the Impact Genome Project. Where do you see it going, and how do you think it'll evolve in coming years?
I love to get a question like this. For anyone who's listening in who's met our CEO, Jason Saul, he's an incredible visionary, and so I'm sure my answer will never be as forward-thinking as Jason would like it to be. But here's what I'll say and how I feel about what we're doing. The kind of comparison we make when we think about the long-term goals of the Impact Genome is we often call ourselves the Bloomberg terminal for social impact. So in the same way that if you want to evaluate, understand, look at your portfolio in an investment of companies, you would look at a Bloomberg terminal. We hope that funders all over the world, whether individual, corporate, foundation, government, will use the Impact Genome to evaluate, benchmark, make decisions for their social impact funding. Again, it's this gift versus investment mentality, and I really think we're changing the game here. You know, if I buy $10,000 in stock from Moody's, I don't show up at Moody's doorstep a year later and say, what did you do with my money? I show up and I say, how was your year? Did you meet the expectations I had of you? Did you have the outcomes you said you were going to have? And ultimately, am I happy with my relationship with you as an investor? But for better or for worse, funders still show up at nonprofits' doorsteps and they say, penny for penny, what did you do with my money? I think if we can change the dynamic so that those questions are the same, how did you do last year? Did you have the outcomes you said you were going to have? Am I happy with our relationship as partners? That's going to be the game changer that makes corporations and really any funder, whether individual or institutional, look at nonprofits in a way that is more partnership, that is more trust, that's more investment based and focused. And I think that will change the game. That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic, and it's very aspirational. I appreciate the aspirational nature of it. Please don't make us all learn another computing software. That's all I'm saying, because I'm struggling with Mac and PC here. That's all I've got in me.
Don't worry,
Arlene,
we've got your back.
Thank you. Arlene, what about you? What do you hope to achieve in coming years?
Well,
with your
I echo the
participation?
comments that Marcy made about changing the dynamics of the conversation. But I am also looking forward to a sort of broader participation by both corporate funders and nonprofits, because I think the true value of this, at least one of the true values of this, is the ability to compare and contrast not only between nonprofits, but also other corporate funders who may have a similar or aligned interest, and the ability to really think about how we could perhaps partner to have even greater impact with some of the nonprofits that we're both investing in, as Marcy said. And so I think that this is a great pathway forward, and really does align with the way that we at Moody's do business. We look at ourselves as standard setters, and I think if mission measurement can be and the Impact Genome project can become sort of the standard for at least how we're baseline evaluating the outcomes and efficacy of the nonprofit organizations that we fund, there's a different conversation to be had, not just with the nonprofit, but also with other corporate funders.
Fantastic, and I think that's a perfect note to start to wind up and think about follow-up, because I'd be lying if I said we don't want more participants in the Impact Genome project so that we can build this research and start to provide some really, really rigorous benchmarks with more participation from companies and their nonprofit partners. We can start to break down the data. We can start to look at which industries are pushing the needle on certain outcomes. We can start to look at what size companies tend to fund what types of outcomes, and really just sort of dig into the data and analyze it and draw more robust conclusions that'll help you ultimately become smarter funders, I think, or smarter investors. Sorry, it wasn't giving. Wasn't giving. So that's okay.
Funders is okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll take it. So as a follow-up, the report, as I said, will be available tomorrow, 12:30 p.m. on the Conference Board website. You can visit conferenceboard.org there, and you'll see it there in the banner on the front page. In terms of participating in the Impact Genome project, I think, Marcy, correct me if I'm wrong here, if this is the best thing to do, but I think just following up directly with you is the right way to go. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes, okay. Definitely. Look forward to it.
Excellent. So that was nice and easy. Marcy's email address is on the slide there. And as a reminder, you can download the slides via the download pod in front of you there. And then finally, we are also, the Conference Board is also fielding a societal investment survey. It's open just for another 10 days, couple of weeks or so. And what's interesting about this is that we're aligning the social impact areas that we're measuring for resources going in or investments into corporate philanthropy. We're aligning those with the social impact areas that the Impact Genome project uses, so that not necessarily right away, but ultimately we'll be able to have even more information about the types of investments going into certain social impact areas and the outcomes that are being achieved at the other end in those social impact areas as well. So those two projects really starting to align and give us more information about corporate societal investment. So you can participate in that survey. The link is there as well for a couple more weeks, and we thank you if you do. But other than that, that brings us to the end of our agenda today. So I want to thank Eileen Isaacs-Lowe, Global CSR Head of the Moody's Corporation, the President of the Moody's Foundation. Thank you for joining us. And Marcy Tweet, our Managing Director of Mission Measurement. Thank you both very, very much for joining us and sharing your experiences with us. I hope everyone on the line has found it interesting and will follow up with more questions. You're welcome to do so. But for now, I will say thank you to everyone for joining us. This has been a special webcast from the Conference Board, and we look forward to seeing you again.